Hello and welcome to esm², the podcast for experienced social media marketers. I'm Emily, your host and long-term member of the team here at Iconosquare. Iconosquare is one of the leading analytics and management tools for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and newly TikTok. We're proud to work with some of the biggest agencies in the world, as well as huge brands such as Patagonia, Sephora, Versace and even NASA. If you're new to Iconosquare or just haven't got around to checking out our tools before, you can start with the basics by heading over to audit.iconosquare.com and getting a free audit of your Instagram and Facebook accounts to find out once and for all where you're flying high and where you're falling flat. These audits are extremely helpful when it comes to identifying problem areas and efficiently improving your social media strategy. If you're a regular listener of esm², you'll know that we have two types of episode: the interviews with social media experts, where professionals share with me and all of you their experiences working with social media, as well as their internal strategies, tips, tricks, and more. And we also have tutorial episodes in which I talk all by myself about a particular topic, which can often be a burning question for social media marketers like you and help guide you into making strong decisions for your social strategy. This episode is an interview, and I was delighted to interview Aaron Bisman, Vice President of the Sesame Workshop in charge of audience development. Aaron is extremely articulate when it comes to the values and mission behind the global nonprofit that is Sesame Street. There's a ton of inspiration to be taken from the way that Sesame Street uses social media as a means of communication with their loyal community. I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating once you're done listening. And don't forget, you can try Iconosquare for free for a whole 2 weeks, and you don't need to share any credit card information to get started. Contact me directly for any questions or feedback via emily@iconosquare.com. Aaron, you are the Vice President of the Sesame Workshop in charge of audience development. Such a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to have this conversation.
Cool. Let's get straight into some general questions. So Sesame Street is known all over the world, if I'm not mistaken, but just for the sake of the podcast, could you give me a bit of history about the charity itself and how it came to be so iconic?
Sure. So Sesame Street is the longest running children's program in the United States. And, core to who we are is, experimental and constantly innovating. So originally, the idea came about in the late 1960s, and this was during the civil rights movement in the US and during President Johnson's war on poverty. And there was a new wave of research that was showing just how far children living in poverty were falling behind in terms of education. And so against this backdrop, a young TV producer and an educational psychologist, this is Joan Gans Cooney and Lloyd Morissette, our founders, they had this simple but really revolutionary idea to see if television could be used to teach and to really help level the playing field for low-income families so that all children could arrive to school ready to learn. And so, this is the moment when television adoption is exploding. So most US homes at this point have a TV set, but the programming is pretty junky. It was famously dubbed a vast wasteland. And Lloyd in particular tells a story of hearing kids going around singing jingles from beer commercials that they had seen on TV, right? So he and Joan started to wonder, if kids could learn beer jingles, right? Why couldn't they learn things like letters and numbers from TV as well? And so they took this idea to a couple of funders, the Carnegie Corporation, Ford Foundation, and the U.S. Department of Education. And they provided the needed funds for launch. And from the get-go, right, this was not just television creators, but they were researchers, educators, and of course, writers and producers. Soon after that, they brought in Jim Henson and his Muppet creations and, created the show that we all know and love today. So from the outset, we were founded as a nonprofit, and today we are a global nonprofit with a mission to help kids everywhere grow smarter, stronger, and kinder, right? We think about smarter by teaching basic literacy and numeracy, stronger meaning fostering physical and mental health and resilience, and kinder by modeling inclusion and mutual respect. So we are present in 150 countries and really focused on serving the world's most vulnerable children. In many countries, we have co-productions where we have local partners. And everywhere we are in the world, we look to tailor the show and our efforts to reflect the lives of local children and the unique challenges that they face. So in South Africa, that meant addressing HIV and AIDS, girls' education in India, or conflict and displacement in the Middle East. And at the heart of all of this is something we really believe in, which is the power of early childhood education to change lives. So along with the TV show, we create all kinds of educational resources. We do trainings for educators and different types of providers. And we also seek out partnerships when we know we can't do this work alone. So yeah, we are really proud of what we've grown into over 52 years. And looking forward, it's about continued innovation, continued experimentation, new shows, new work in new places. It's a really exciting time to be involved in this work.
What a wonderful story from the ground up and beyond.
Yeah, so many more stories to be told. I will say there's a great documentary soon to be available worldwide called Street Gang, and it really tells the story of our founding. And it's been a lot of fun, even working here, learning new things through having other storytellers, helping us rediscover and relearn even more about our founding.
Great. When's that going to be available? Can you not say?
It's actually a rolling release, so it has different release dates around the world, but it'll be available in the UK in late January and elsewhere from there.
Great. Okay, we'll be sure to keep an eye out for that. Let's just come back to the more operational inside of Sesame, how it works. What is your personal role in the team today? Has it evolved? Where are you today?
Sure. So our entire marketing department has been evolving over the past few years. We have a new Chief Marketing Officer, Samantha Malton, and she joined a little less than 3 years ago. And so she has done a lot and has a really clear vision of the work ahead of us for a global company, to really think about how we unify our brand, how we elevate our nonprofit status, and the needs that we meet. And part of that was rethinking our direct to audience strategy. And so she created a new role here, which is the role that I came into about a year and a half ago as VP of Audience Development. So we've been using social media for almost 10 years. I'm not sure if that makes the company pioneering, but it certainly was early days for thinking about fictional characters and kids television being on social. So we've been in that space, but I came in to really bring a holistic approach to all the ways that we directly speak to consumers. So much of our work is through partnerships, right? We distributed by PBS, now in the US, now by PBS and HBO Max through Warner Media. Again, we said different partners all over the world, which meant we would make a show and make some marketing assets, and they would be handled by those partners. But of course, the world today has changed, and every content creator is expected to build their own relationships for all kinds of reasons. In our case, this really helps us further our educational and nonprofit objectives. It's not only about viewership, although that's important. And so it's all the more important that we develop and further these channels. So for us, it's not just social, that's email marketing, thinking about web strategy and what our web presence is in all these places. And so I work sort of across those areas to really develop and optimize each channel, but also to ensure that we're always thinking about the interplay between them. And so some of this comes back to like a traditional marketing funnel, and I'm often the guy. So my role is cross-functional, and often I'm in the meetings just asking the questions of, how do these pieces connect? Which audience is this for? Which step in the funnel, right? Is this tactic or asset intended for? Do they all connect? Is there a through line and a through logic through all those pieces? Separately, I'm also involved in a really interesting project here that we refer to as our data infrastructure project. So Sesame is invested in building a data lake where we're putting all of our owned and available third-party data sources so that we can begin to visualize them, not just individually, but connected to one another. And so when it comes to social, I've always joked I did poor man's data science, really the most complicated Excel sheets I could manage, pulling in from every possible source to have those kinds of calculations now done for us, really helps us move like leaps and bounds forward in the real data science that we can tackle. And the goal there, of course, is just to do this work better, more efficiently, and to get to the insights much faster than we could otherwise. So that's a really exciting thing for us internally, that we expect to have external value, over time. But short term, it's already been incredibly powerful for us and just an exciting part of the work we do day to day internally.
Wow, that's impressive. I hear that you're obviously not just about the social media, that there are lots of different bricks that come to create your wall, which is your marketing strategy over there at Sesame. Obviously, I want to focus mainly on social media. That's what the podcast is about, although I'm sure I could ask you 1,000 questions. What would you say are the main goals of Sesame on social media at the moment? And how good are you at achieving your goals?
Sure. So we have a lot of accounts. I have trouble keeping track. I believe we're at 22 right now. So
What?
yeah. So because we have Sesame Street, the show, right? And Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are our real focused social channels. So Sesame Street has 3. Sesame Workshop, the overarching organization, has 3. We recently relaunched a set of channels called Sesame Studios, because we actually have a few shows that we produce that are not Sesame Street. Some are spin-offs, like the Not Too Late Show with Elmo, and others are standalone IP, Helpsters and Ghostwriter on Apple TV, for instance, Esme and Roy on HBO Max and Cartoonito. So Sesame Studios becomes our place to promote and build relationships with fans or future fans of those shows. Okay, that's 9. And then we have our core characters, and they are all on Facebook and Twitter. Elmo's on Instagram. Other characters will join him on Instagram. So a lot of background, but in summary, we have a lot of channels. So our different channels do have different goals. We think about the organizational channels and the character channels. And the truth is that the character channels are much harder, right? Speaking in these characters' voices takes quite a bit of time to learn to do. There's how to do it correctly, and there's also then how to do it well. I think we've gotten correct. I mean, again, I've been here a year and a half. Our social media director has been here only 6 months. We have a coordinator who's actually been here longer than both of us and really helps us guide a lot of this. But so I think that we understand how to speak in the characters' voices. I think we continue to refine how to do it really, really well. And so that piece is slower. Our characters do not tweet very often. And when they do, we're looking for maximum impact, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about. And so we focus day to day right now really on our institutional channels. And I would say, if I had to grade us, I would say, in all honesty, right, it changes month to month. In general, I think we're doing pretty well. I think we have a good understanding of what we want to do. And that is first and foremost, like, we're there to entertain in order to educate, right? So there's a lot of layered goals. But ultimately we're looking to make impact, to make mission impact, which means supporting revenue goals and supporting, content consumption and in some cases really specific campaigns and projects. For instance, around all through COVID, we've created a number of resources for parents and caregivers to support them with kids while in lockdown, et cetera. So on the macro goals, we feel pretty good, but some of the macro goals it's a long haul, right? And understanding the direct impact will take some time. Short term also, like we've had an increase in online donations. We're looking for increases in clicks to our websites. Some conversions are harder to track than others. But we also look at social chatter, right? There's what we put on social and there's what everyone else talks about us. And so we're measuring, of course, with our own metrics, but we're also curious to see how we influence what others talk about. And then can see that impact, in a number of other indirect ways as well, press articles, politicians talking about us, others, et cetera. So the truth is we look at a wide variety of metrics, but the starting point on each of our channels for us is engagement. Globally, we look at, depending on we have different channels in different stages. We also have, I think over 10 of our productions internationally also have social presences. So Takalani Sesame in South Africa, Achlan Simsim in the Middle East, Sesame Strauch. My German pronunciation is terrible. We probably shouldn't use that, but we have German and Belgium accounts. And so those accounts are in different phases, right? Some of them are newer. And so we're in the process right now of dividing our goals by channel to really ask the question, like, is it a growth phase or an engagement phase? If it's in a growth phase, we are primarily looking at followership and reach. If it's in an engagement phase, we're not just looking at engagements, but the engagement rate, engagements per post, wanting to be as intentional as possible, and understanding that, at least for us, we always want to reach more people, but having those likes or followers is only but so meaningful and only but so valuable anymore. So we want to get the channels as big as we think is possible and reasonable, and then really focus from there on connecting with the individuals who have made those likes. And so engagement is really where it's at for us.
For a lot of companies, engagement is the big one. What kind of content is it that you are focusing on creating? And who designs it? Who creates the actual content? I guess you're in charge of a lot of the captions, like the textual elements, are you? Or I'm not sure.
Yeah. So the starting point is that we've developed a series of content verticals, right? And it's fluid, but thinking about content that is just evergreen, fun stuff for fans versus calls to action, right? Versus birthdays, holidays, and cultural events, right? We have I think over 10 verticals. The main point of those verticals is to ensure that the channels don't feel stale, right? That when we're programming, we're really careful to mix up those types of content. So from there, the social team has to really think about how to flesh those things out. We do have certain verticals where we have different teams providing content to us. Our Sesame Street in Communities is our domestic social impact team. They create a lot of these resources. They often create social graphics or social content to support and to go along with the content they're already creating. So that gets delivered to us. For the shows themselves, right, they have promos that are made and key art. So there's a fair amount that's made for us. Not always the copy sometimes, but certainly the visuals and the video. But I would say that the vast majority of the content we put up, we are curating from the incredible archive, that we have of 52 years of shows and resources. The vast majority of the written content is written by my team, not by me. I do not take credit for any of that. But they're doing a lot of the writing, and often it's a very collaborative process. As nonprofits go, at least in my personal experience, like we're not a tiny place, and we have a lot of teams, just like at the beginning, right? There's researchers and educators and TV writers. But for social, it really is helpful because I really believe that when you have people with different experiences and outlooks, right, all working together for a common goal, you actually get to the best work. It's not the fastest process, but it does get you often to the most impactful product. So it is very collaborative. We write a lot. We rely a lot on our archive, and then we do have creatives. We have a dedicated designer in our brand creative team who is creating graphics and assets for social. Hard for me to break it down by percentage, but it's not insignificant how much content is made uniquely for social. And then we take all that, we repackage it and make it available to our international team so that they can utilize it on their social channels if they want to as well.
Brilliant. I completely agree with what you say about how the copy needs to be a collaborative effort. It needs to, in order for it to really be impactful. I feel that every day in my work. So I completely hear you on that. We didn't talk about your audience. So you're obviously like in charge of audience development, but who is your actual ideal target audience, and how do you go about reaching them? I'm guessing it's not the kids themselves for the most part.
Yeah, so this is something really unique, particularly about being a 52-year-old brand that continues to have relevance today and is still on air. So I feel lucky. Part related to our data infrastructure work and the birth of audience development here was a major research project done on audience segmentation. And working both with our internal researchers and an outside agency called Known, we established our total addressable market and identified them in 6 distinct segments, right? 4 of which we feel are a focus. And we really use that. That is domestic. We have a lot to learn still about our international audiences. But we found quickly, I'm so glad I started in this role before Facebook shut down their Facebook audience insights, because it was very, very valuable, that tool for me. And we saw alignment to the audience segments as identified externally to followers across our social channels with distinct segments on distinct channels. So we think we have 2 parent segments that we think about, right? Just different attitudinal makeups of parents of current or recent Sesame viewers, right? Then we have adult fans. And this is, it's pretty evident to us but on social and elsewhere. And we love having such excited and passionate adults, in the lives of this brand. I really think of them as our brand ambassadors and influencers. They really help us, get messaging out. They also give us all kinds of feedback, sometimes teaching us things about our own show and history that we may have lost track of. And then, because we're a nonprofit, like, we do have to raise money to achieve our goals. Our distribution deals do not provide enough funds to do all of the important work we need to do. And so thinking about our donors, a core segment of donors as one of those 4 segments is also really important for us. So kids absolutely are a segment. At Sesame, we do not treat YouTube as a social platform, but rather as a distribution platform. And so YouTube lives with the teams that are also programming for our channels and SVOD or other streaming services, et cetera. And they think very much about directly serving children. But in the marketing side, we're very careful that we're not marketing directly to kids. We're speaking to their parents and the loved ones around them, and fans and people who just feel nostalgia for the brand. So we're balancing 22 channels, 4 audience segments. But as I said, what we found early on was that certain channels already spoke pretty naturally, had built natural audiences with certain segments. And we keep that in mind when we look to launch new channels or grow existing channels, to ensure that there is sort of proper alignment and that our expectations align with reality. And of course, if not, we don't force the audience segment. We shift strategy and iterate from there.
Great. And so you have spoken about the platforms that you put most of your focus on, but are those all of the platforms that you're present on? Do you have other platforms which are more in the shadows, which you're still in the process of building up? Have you thought about the newer platforms, TikTok, etc.? How do you feel about those?
Yeah, so those are the platforms we're active on. We have platforms that live, I would say, in between social and other spaces. Like, we're on LinkedIn. Our HR team does update that regularly, and we are involved with some of that content. So again, I don't think of it as core social. We have been on other platforms, but they're really dormant at this point. And we're always keeping tabs on new platforms. With new platforms, there's a lot of questions for us to address, like, are our core audiences on them? I've only worked in nonprofit media and arts and culture throughout my whole career. And so I really have a clear approach to new platforms, which is that, especially as nonprofits, where we are entrusted with money from the public, that we have to be what it means to be experimental is different than, say, a startup or other kinds of companies. And so our job is not to be groundbreaking. It is to be a few steps ahead of our peers and competitors, right? And so in that way, when we look at these platforms, did we need to be on TikTok a year ago? I'm not sure. Do we need to be on TikTok now? It's feeling more and more likely. However, when you look at like other children's media brands, like, some are there, some are not yet. So I would say TikTok is an active evaluation. We're very aware that if we go onto TikTok, the social strategy we operate today on these other platforms won't work. And we would basically have to build an entirely new strategy with new content needs. And so it's something we're exploring. I don't think you'll see us on Snapchat. And frankly, there's new platforms we're always learning about and considering. Message boards are not a place. In my knowledge, we have not been active there previously. But like, will we need to be on Discord in a few years? I don't know the answer, but I would say so. TikTok is maybe the most obvious, but it's still in that cadre of newer platforms with younger audiences where we're exploring, we're keeping tabs on them, we're considering the implications. For now, I would say we are happy and very busy on the 3 platforms we're on.
I think that's a very meaningful and considerate way of looking at it. When you obviously I tend to forget that you're a non-profit. You haven't just raised funds from an investor. It's from the members of the public. So I think it's very meaningful the way that you look at it.
Yeah, it keeps us honest, right? It really keeps us honest, and as amazing as this organization is, like we think about budgets, and like we don't want to be wasteful, right? We want to be confident, and it's an important lens that we look that the social team looks at its work through, just like so many others.
Much respect. Can you tell me what a perfect post is for Sesame Street? Do you like to try out loads of different formats, or?
Yeah, I can. Well, again, so I think we have a few, right? I will say that numeric at this point let's take Sesame Street, for instance. We know the numbers. So we know what we consider success, right? And we have ranges for reach, at least. It's funny. Even though we're focused on engagement, we still have to base some of this, at least initially, on reach, just because it's the fastest metric to get tabs on. So there's a few different types of posts, but I will take as an example something we did in November. And I take zero credit for this. All credit goes to Nate. All credit goes to Nate Nagy and Christina Vitas, my amazing social team. And it was World Mental Health Day. And this is the day we've marked primarily on our Sesame Workshop channels. They brought it onto Sesame Street, utilizing some existing resources from our Sesame Street in Communities team. So the asset they used were about mental health, but had been posted in other contexts. And they wrote some new copy, bringing it into World Mental Health Day and posting them on Sesame Street's channels. And the reach was incredible. I reached 2.7 million people across platforms just with this. I believe that's across 3 posts, one on each platform. And the engagement was great, including the responses we saw. And so to us, why is that so successful? The other form of success is like a cute, we put Cookie Monster in a tutu, and it was like, Monday mood or something. And like that also did really well. And it's not insignificant to put, where at least for some people who might see Cookie gendered and to see him in a tutu, like that inclusivity is not insignificant. It's still primarily a fun, light post, right? So seeing that reach 200 or 400,000 people is also success. But for us, that sort of has to be our bread and butter. Like we need to be able to churn that out with some predictability. But so when we come to something that's a little more serious in nature, and we can use our furry, lovable characters, right, to speak to adults, whether they connect nostalgically or actively because their kids are involved, or otherwise, right? And we can talk to them about a serious topic that might impact them and or the children in their lives, and give them a quick tip or help or just reassurance. Like that is the work that we are really most proud of. One other example I think I have to give is Big Bird recently tweeted that he got the COVID-19 vaccine, right? That tweet was a direct lift, or that's not true. That tweet was almost a direct lift from a script from a show. We do town halls with CNN on serious topics that we feel our furry and lovable characters, your Sesame Street friends, could really help explain both to children and their parents in a co-viewing environment. In December, we did a CNN town hall, the ABC's of COVID-19 vaccines. So within the script and on that special, Big Bird got his vaccine. We took that copy, edited it just slightly, and had Big Bird tweet it, right? Our other characters also tweeted from the special, but Big Bird was the only character to get the vaccine during the special and to say, I just got the vaccine. My wing is a little sore, but I'm so glad that I have this protection for myself and my family and those around me. And Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, who enjoys stirring pots, quote tweeted Big Bird something about now they're trying to brainwash 5-year-olds. And this created a big brouhaha. So this follows a certain trajectory that we've seen before. When a politician gets involved, and maybe their reasoning or their logic maybe doesn't hold for a lot of people. And then others, right? This gets into social listening. They're not just retweeting us and liking Big Bird's tweet, although they did that. The Big Bird's tweet ultimately had 35 million impressions. But they also start talking about themselves. And so that trajectory escalates to late night talk show hosts, talking about this and joking. And yes, they're talking about Ted Cruz going after a 6.5-year-old 8-foot yellow bird. But people are also coming back to that tweet, sharing our tweet, sharing with us photos of their kids getting their vaccines, and telling us how this has been helpful to them. Then President Biden responds, right? And then it becomes the cold open on Saturday Night Live. So again, what was our goal when we made that tweet to get on Saturday Night Live? Absolutely not. Did we understand the power of a character tweeting and tweeting about a topic this important and sort of where it could go? We certainly understood most of that trajectory. And it's amazing to see how that kind of thing travels. So our strategy is to set up for the most success possible, to understand what's possible, and to know when it is important to re-engage, to escalate, to de-escalate. And so I think for me, those two examples really speak to what success looks like for us today.
Incredible that you had that buzz, right?
It was wild and really rewarding to see. I will say that the impetus for it was looking at the data. So we've been thinking about how to make our characters' voices more active, on Twitter and social generally. As I said at the beginning, it's hard to write in a Muppet's voice correctly. And, each character has a unique voice. It's not like Elmo, Cookie Monster, Big Bird, Oscar, Grover, Bert and Ernie, Abby. They don't speak the same way. They don't talk about the same things. They don't have the same personalities. And so it takes time. And we were in a planning phase to make each of those accounts more active. And when we went back and looked at the previous year's data, which twice a year, we do massive analyses to go beyond what we're looking at on a daily and monthly basis. And what we noticed was that across 8 character accounts on Twitter in the previous year, we had tweeted a total of 70 times, but had reached, I think, with over 3 or 4 million people reached total. And what that told us was that we might want consistency, right? We might want them to have 300, across 8 accounts. We might want them each tweeting a couple times a week, but it wasn't necessary to make impact. And with that awareness, when this CNN town hall came up, right, that led me to say to our team, we have to bring these characters' voices in. It's an important topic. The characters are in the special. Let's do that. Had we not done that look back and that data analysis, we would have thought that the plans we were making were the right ones. Characters, there's no point in tweeting once if you're not going to tweet, consistently from there. And so I just think in the context of this conversation, I thought that was something hopefully useful for listeners to know, at least about our strategy, which is just how agile we try to be, and also transparent. So we talk a lot about what our plans are, what we hope for, what our benchmarks are. But when things don't work or we have a new insight, we also talk about that. We want to share our process and the outcomes. I really find that with more transparency, right? Transparency calculated risk, right? And of course, results. That's how you build trust, not just with your boss or supervisors or leadership, but also, with peers and others in the organization. And so that's been important to me, really everywhere I've been, and continue that here, and really trying to bring that into my team, that, sharing is better than, we don't hide anything, and we're not afraid of things that don't work, right? We certainly don't want to see things falling flat. We don't want to see, numbers dipping, which is why we look daily, weekly, monthly, and not only biannually. But we don't only share the successes, right? We're pretty forward about, here's something we thought would land and it didn't. Here's what we've learned about it. Here's the shifts we're making as a result. And we find that, in the trust that you build there, in the moments when we really do want to go somewhere new, try something new, it's a little easier, because of the trust that's been built, to say, like, there could be more space to make some new experiment, some new attempt, because internally, we're not going to hide the results. If it doesn't work, we'll tell you and we'll move on. But if it does work, we're going to celebrate that and build off of that as well.
So you're seeing it as a failure, as something which didn't work out the way that you wanted. But is there such thing as bad press? I mean,
oh, well, first of all, I would say I don't think, did I use the word failure?
No, you didn't.
Right. No, I'm not into failure. So, I mean, it personally, in my personal backstory, like I founded and ran a music and media nonprofit for 10 years. And ultimately when I closed it, I had 9 employees. We were bi-coastal. It was something, I was very proud of it. We made a lot of impact in that space. And when we closed, right, my lens was never failure, right? We failed to raise money in that moment, certainly. But my lens was not failure then. And I've certainly carried that with me. Like, no, if something doesn't perform the way we want, right? It didn't perform the way we wanted. I think failure is when you don't succeed at something, you don't acknowledge it, and you move on as if it didn't happen and try to pretend. Like, to me, that's failure. And I find that totally unacceptable in myself and in the work I do. So, I think talking about bad press, good press, I think that's a different matter. Like, if I think just about social, right? If my goal is engagement, right? So I have a numeric goal per post per month that I want to hit, right? I also have an engagement rate target per platform. And things that underperform those things, again, it's not a failure, it's an underperformance. And then there's overperformance. I'm actually, personally, what I want is consistency. I love having a great viral moment, but I want intentionality to me, that is, I won't say the ultimate, but that is like advanced strategy. When you're firing on all cylinders and now you can say, right, I'm going to make this post and I can predict it's going to get within this range of reach and approximately, this many engagements at this engagement rate, right? And if I'm wrong, I want to understand how I missed that, iterate and predict again. None of this has to do with press. I love working with my peers in the comms team, strategizing together, thinking together, but I will leave any questions about press to them because it is not my lane to talk about.
Good answer. There's a bad pun in there somewhere about the COVID post going viral, I think. But
there definitely is. Well, yeah, others have made them.
I think we've been over the main questions. Are you okay to head on to the quickfire questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you 4 questions quite rapidly, and I'm looking for the first answer that comes into your head.
Sure, no problem. Shoot.
What takes up most of your time as a professional working on social media?
So personally, it's a combination of strategy and data analysis. I spend a lot of time. We look at graphs. We graph our year. For us, it's fiscal years separately on a horizontal calendar because December is always going to be better, say, than a July. We need to see how did we perform relative to last December. So I spend a lot of time looking at those graphs in an effort to understand, are we trending in the right directions, and if we're not, what's the cause? And from there, I jump back into strategy. Is the current strategy we have in place the right one? From there, like our social team our mighty team of 2 currently, is really empowered to run those channels. So I certainly I supervise, I overlook, I talk through things with them, but I live primarily in strategy and analysis day to day.
Your 3 essential tools for social media marketing.
Sure. So I had trouble. The tools is such a broad word. So I'm going to say 4 things. Curiosity, agility, constant content consumption, and I'm not trying to cheat here, but I really mean it, Iconosquare, and a couple other tools. So what I mean about, to me, curiosity is the most important thing. I am a voracious consumer of content. Some of it I like, some of it I just feel like I need to see and know. But if you don't stay curious, you cannot be good at social. And I think, very frankly, many of us are in a moment like that right now, where at least, the last couple of months, Facebook algorithm seems to be making some interesting shifts. And it's a moment of like, if you're not curious to understand what is happening to your channels and to the marketplace, the strategy you had in place, for however long in the past, almost definitely is not going to perform for you right now or into the future. And that's an immediate example. But you can't be complacent. Agility, as we've been talking about, you got to be able to pivot very, very quickly. And I lift up Iconosquare. And again, no, you did not ask me to do this, but
I didn't. I really didn't.
I think I told you I was going to anywhere. I don't know how I found Iconosquare many years ago. I've used it now in a couple of roles, but there are some things like having my Instagram stories available to me to be able to revisit metrics and actually see the stories that at least I don't find other places. It's a unique tool for me, right? Beyond that, I would say generally, right, like having your of course, looking at our native social insights is incredibly important and powerful. So native social analytics. And then I think for us, right, being able to monitor social conversations is also important. So we have another piece of software for that. That is not necessary for every brand, every handle. But at the scale and reach that our brand has, it is important for us to have that monitoring. So sorry, that wasn't so rapid. But those, when I think of tools, and I mean this honestly, like other than yours, there aren't specific tools I think that I have to have. It's more about those categories. But I always come back to curiosity and agility as being more important than anything else in my arsenal. As well as like, that's what I look for, in hiring for these kinds of roles, right? Of course, experience, but it's a mindset, it's an approach that I think really makes the difference.
Now I want to know your favorite accounts on social media, personally to you.
I'm having a really hard time personally with the Instagram algorithm because it thinks that all I care about is the MCU. Because, I do like movies and I have a 13-year-old son who ask me all kinds of questions. But I will say personally, 2 I'm really into right now. One is SEA, oceanography. Anything that takes me under the ocean is a beautiful escape for me. I love snorkeling and any chance I get to it feels so otherworldly to me, and I often need that escape. And one I just discovered a few weeks ago is called The Cheat Sheets. It's on Instagram. And it is, it's all Microsoft Excel hacks. And I guess I'm geeky that way. I am self-taught in a lot of things, or taught by amazing mentors, but as opposed to school. Like I went to school, but I don't have a master's degree. I think a lot, like many people in social, you learn on the job. The day I learned pivot tables was transformative. And so an account like the Cheat Sheets, it's not even that I'm using it so much, but just, again, back to my curiosity, seeing how much more there is to learn. So I have trouble coming up with one third account. Certainly most of my social feed, I'm sure like many others, is friends, and just keeping up, especially in these times, being able to keep up with their lives and what's going on with them. But those are 2 that when I see them in my feed, I'm always happy and I stop and, curious to see what they have going on.
It's important to have accounts which are nothing to do with your work, I think.
Yeah. Well, and both, right? For me, it's been both directions. I want things that are totally unrelated, and then finding ones that are actually very practical, which frankly, I don't think I have enough of. I'm always looking for more. But having those extremes, it also keeps my feed interesting.
Absolutely. And finally, a piece of advice that you would give to other professional social media managers or professionals working with social media.
Yeah, I think it's just my process, and the process I really believe in, which is to, hypothesize, test that hypothesis, analyze it, iterate on it, and repeat, right? This is a never ending process. And I do think that is the most important thing, is it's never stop learning, right? Never stop testing, never assume that what you did yesterday is going to work tomorrow. That is the mindset, I think, that really fundamentally makes for winning social content and winning social accounts.
Well, thank you for that advice. And thank you, Aaron, for all of the advice that you've given during this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thanks for all of the insights and for everything that you've shared with us today. Absolute pleasure.
Emily, thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed talking with you.
And that's all for today's episode. Don't forget you can check out our other tutorials and interviews with experienced social media marketers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn. Please don't hesitate to give this episode a rating, and for all questions and comments or to inquire about being interviewed on ESM², contact me directly via emily@iconosquare.com.